What's going on, pilots, and welcome to the first episode of my new Titanfall weapon review series. I'm going to kick off this series with my go-to weapon in Titanfall, the R-101C, which is described in game as a fully automatic compact assault weapon commonly used throughout the frontier. And I've got to say, this thing does look pretty awesome. It's like a futuristic mix between the SCAR and the ACR. The R-101C is the weapon that everyone gets hold of right at the start of the game, so I'm sure it's one we're all familiar with. And it's got a nice mix of stats and features which makes it a very versatile weapon. So let's get straight on with this guide and take a look at some of those stats and figures for the R-101C Carbine. So starting off with the damage rating, this weapon weighs in with a profile of 50, dropping off to 40. Now if you're new to Titanfall, these figures might seem pretty high, but you've got to remember that the health ratings for pilots are much higher at 200 as opposed to grunts, which have the usual 100. This means that the R-101C is going to equate to needing 4 to 5 shots to kill. That overall damage profile is pretty average when you compare it to the likes of the Spitfire LMG or the burst or semi-auto weapons, but its ability to kill in 4 to 5 shots is pretty good. You're only going to be able to better that with a 3 to 4 shot kill weapon. Whereas a lot of the weapons do have drastic damage drop off over range, the R-101C does hold its deadly range pretty well, allowing you to secure kills in 4 shots up to 32 meters. Aside from the sniper rifles, this is as far as a weapon can reach out with its max damage figure. So damage, shots to kill and range are 3 figures that we're used to looking at from other shooters, but with this being Titanfall, there's some new statistics to take into consideration, one of them being the weapon's damage against Titans, specifically when you're on its bike rodeoing it. As we'll see as part of this series, there's some surprising figures under the rodeo damage. There's some pistols that actually do much higher damage than a lot of the primary weapons, and that's definitely the case with the R-101C. This weapon only does 100 damage points while rodeoing, which I've rated it as 2 out of 5. Just to put that in perspective, we've got the auto pistol, which does 110 points of damage, or the Hammond P2011, which does 190. So this is a great example of how looking at the stats of a weapon can really help improve your playstyle. The magazine size for the R-101C is pretty average at 30 rounds, so you can extend that up to 40 rounds with the extended mag attachment. When compared to the whole spectrum of weapons, we've got the likes of the LMG, which has a massive capacity, or the R97 SMG, which comes along with 40 rounds as standard. Reload time for this weapon is not too bad at 2.2 seconds or 2.9 seconds from totally empty. The SMGs are the fastest reloading weapons, but you're not going to be left too vulnerable with the R-101C. An 810 rounds per minute fire rate sounds pretty good, but when you compare it to the whole spectrum of weapons, it's pretty average at 3 out of 5. Both those SMGs are obviously much faster, but when it comes to weapons that have the ability to reach out to long ranges, the R-101C is your best choice. And one outstanding feature of the R-101C is its recoil plot. As you can see, this weapon kind of keeps itself on target, and when this series progresses, we'll see how tight this spread is when compared to the other weapons. There's some really crazy spreads from the likes of the SMGs or even the Hemlock burst weapon, but even under full auto fire, the R-101C does allow for quite accurate shots. One interesting thing to note here is that while digging through the weapon stats, I noticed that there was actually meant to be a recoil compensator attachment for the R-101C, which has obviously been omitted in the final release. It's a bit strange considering that this weapon is definitely the lowest recoiling weapon as standard, but I guess if that attachment was in game, it would have been my number 1 choice. There are some really long sight lines across the maps of Titanfall, so you will find that you need to burst fire quite often to take out targets at long range, especially considering that you're going to need 5 hits to kill. And to finish off these guides, I'm also going to take a look at the various mods and attachments that are available for your weapons. In the case of the R-101C, we've got a nice mix of optics and a couple of familiar attachments. So out of all the optics, we've got the plain old iron sights, which come by default. We've also got the cool looking HCOG sight, the holo sight and the AOG sight, all of which have various levels of magnification. One to know is the HCOG at 1.85 times zoom, which is definitely worth weighing up against the no additional magnification of the iron sights. As I discussed in my iron sights versus optics quick tip video, in some cases you might actually prefer the iron sights for that decreased zoom level. Not only does a higher zoom give you more perceived effects of that recoil, but it also becomes more difficult to snap onto targets at close range, so it all depends on your preferred playstyle. I like to mix it up between the iron sights and the HCOG depending on how I want to play, and I'm also in 2 minds between the extended mags and the suppressor. As we discussed, that extended mag increases the capacity from 30 rounds up to 40. Those 10 rounds always coming in handy when you're tackling a group of spectres or grunts. On the other hand, the suppressor can help keep you off the radar and help keep you alive for those flawless games, but you are going to sacrifice your damage output, needing one extra kill at close and long range, making this weapon a 5 to 6 shot kill. But all in all, the R-101C is a versatile weapon that's going to see you through all engagements in Titanfall. It's great at all ranges and doesn't have any stats that really let it down. And when you compare it to some of the major drawbacks that some of the other weapons have, you might actually argue that this is borderline overpowered. I personally wouldn't go as far as screaming OP, but I definitely think it's one of the best weapons in the game, and it's certainly my go-to weapon whenever I want to pull out any good scores. But let me know your thoughts on the R-101C down in the comments. If you learned anything new from my guide, or if you just enjoyed my video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up to help spread the word and share the info with your friends. I do try and put a lot of time into my content, so it's always nice when they perform particularly well. If you really enjoyed it, you might even want to go as far as posting it on Facebook, Twitter, or even the Titanfall Reddit. That'd be a really big help to expose my channel to some new Titanfall fans. If you're new to my videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stick around for all my upcoming Titanfall weapon guides along with my Titanfall loadout series. Otherwise, thanks for watching and I'll catch you all later.